Millionaire witnesses Beggar praying for his comatose daughter. What happens next stuns all. Robert Thompson, Wall Street titan, paced the cold white halls of St. Luke's. His expensive suit, usually screaming power, now just felt wrong, like a costume. 2 years. 2 years since the accident stole Claire's laughter. Now, just silence. Doctors mumbled about vegetative state, about letting go. But Robert, a guy who could move billions with a phone call, was powerless. He visited Claire every day. Promises whispered into a silent room. Prayers thrown at a ceiling that offered nothing back. Then, yesterday, everything changed. He saw him, a street kid, maybe 10, years old, kneeling outside Claire's room. Hair a tangled mess, clothes that probably hadn't seen soap in months. Robert was ready to explode. Security breach! Then he heard it. The kid's voice, soft but intense. "Please, God," he begged. Eyes squeezed shut. "Please wake her up. She's a good person. I know it." Robert froze. Who was this kid? What did he know? The kid, who called himself Alex, claimed he felt a connection to Claire. Crazy, right? But then, things started happening. Tiny things. A flicker of an eyelid. A twitch of a finger. The doctors were baffled. Robert was hooked. Alex started visiting every day, bringing Claire wildflowers he'd picked from Central Park, reading her goofy comic books. And Claire, she seemed to respond. It was insane. Was this homeless kid with his unwavering faith actually healing her? Last night, Robert sat beside Claire, holding her hand, and she squeezed back, hard. He looked at Alex, sitting quietly in the corner, a small, tired smile on his face. But something was wrong. Alex was pale. Too pale. His breathing was shallow, ragged. And then Robert saw it. A thin trickle of blood snaking from Alex's nose. He barely had time to react. Alex slumped forward, unconscious, onto the cold tile floor. What was happening? Ei, antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você está aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. Ah, e me conta nos comentários de qual cidade você está assistindo. Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz. To dar diferença, vamos interagir. Robert yelled for a doctor. Alex, this fragile, skinny kid, was the center of a whirlwind. He was lifted onto a gurney, his face ashen. What the hell was happening? Claire's monitors started beeping faster, louder. Her vitals were spiking. The doctor, a young guy named Miller, looked panicked. "Get me a crash cart, now!" Robert felt like he was watching a movie, a nightmare movie. 1 second, hope, the next, this. They wheeled Alex away. Robert stood there, frozen, looking at Claire. Her eyes were open, wide, scared. She was trying to say something. He leaned closer. "Alex," she whispered, her voice raspy, barely audible. "Help. Him." Then her eyes fluttered shut. The monitors flatlined. "No! Claire, no!" Robert screamed. He grabbed her hand, squeezed it. Nothing. Miller was shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson. We did everything we could." Robert didn't hear him. He was numb. Claire was gone. Again. And Alex, where was Alex? He ran out of the room, pushing past bewildered nurses. He had to find him. He had to save him. This kid was connected to Claire somehow. He could feel it. He found Alex in another room, surrounded by doctors. They were working. Frantically, pumping his chest, shoving tubes down his throat. "What happened?" Robert demanded. A nurse, her face pale, said, He has a rare form of leukemia. It's very aggressive. He doesn't have much time." Leukemia? This kid who had been giving Claire life was dying himself? It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. Robert pushed his way to Alex's side. He grabbed his hand. Alex's skin was cold, clammy. His eyes fluttered open. He looked at Robert, a weak smile on his face. I helped her, right?" he whispered. Robert nodded, tears streaming down his face. "You did, Alex. You did." Alex closed his eyes again. His breathing became shallow, raspy, and then nothing. The doctor checked his pulse. He shook his head. "I'm sorry. He's gone." Robert stood there, stunned. 2 deaths, 2 wives ripped away, and all he was left with was questions. But then something caught his eye, something on Alex's wrist. A bracelet, a silver bracelet with a tiny engraved charm. He leaned closer, squinting in the dim light. The charm was a heart, and engraved on the heart were the initials C.T. Claire Thompson. Robert's breath caught in his throat. He knew that bracelet. He'd given it to Claire's mother, his ex-wife, years ago, before she abandoned Claire. He grabbed the bracelet, his hand shaking. Alex was Claire's brother? But how? He never knew Claire had a brother. And his ex-wife. She never said a word. A nurse accidentally bumped Robert's arm, startling him, and he looked up. That's when he saw it, Alex's medical chart. But something was wrong. There was a different name on it, Alexander Hayes, and below it in bold letters, "Do not resuscitate." The paper fell from Robert's trembling hands as a realization washed over him. He suddenly understood everything. His ex-wife, she knew about Claire. And about Alex. She sent him here. But why? And what was the meaning of the "do not resuscitate" order? Had she orchestrated all of this? The paper fell from Robert's trembling hands as a realization washed over him. He suddenly understood everything. His ex-wife, she knew about Claire and about Alex. She sent him here. But why? And what was the meaning of the "do not resuscitate" order? Had she orchestrated all of this? His head swam. He needed answers. Now, he pulled out his phone, his fingers fumbling with the screen. He had to call Sarah, his ex-wife, the woman he hadn't spoken to in years. The woman who'd walked out on Claire, on him, without a backward glance. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Just when he was about to give up, she answered. "Robert?" Her voice was cold, distant, just like he remembered. "Sarah, what the hell is going on? Alex, that kid? He was Claire's brother? Why didn't you ever tell me?" Silence. A long, agonizing silence. "Sarah, answer me!" Robert roared, his voice echoing in the sterile hospital hallway. He wasn't supposed to. Her voice cracked. "I just wanted him to see her, to know she was okay. I didn't want any of this to happen." Sent a dying kid to see his sister, knowing she was in a coma? And you didn't tell me he was her brother? He wanted to help her, Robert. He always asked about her, about Claire. I just thought, maybe what, Sarah? Maybe he'd magically wake her up and then conveniently die so you could finally feel like a good person? "No, that's not it," she screamed. "He had the bracelet. He snuck away to see Claire. I didn't know." "What do you mean, the bracelet?" "I saw it at the hospital. It was a silver bracelet with a tiny engraved heart." Robert spoke in a state of shock. Sarah's voice started to crack. she confessed. Years ago, after I left, I couldn't bear to keep the bracelet anymore. It reminded me of everything I lost, of the family I abandoned. I wanted to get rid of the memories, so I sold it at a local pawn shop. But here's the twist, Robert. That pawn shop was owned by none other than Alex's adoptive father. A kind man who took him in when he had no one else. Alex always admired that bracelet and knew it was meant for someone special. When his adoptive father passed away, Alex inherited the shop and recognized the initials CT on the heart. Robert paused, completely stunned. So, what's the twist, Sarah? The twist is, Robert, there were two bracelets. It looks like I got confused, she yelled at him through the phone. Robert's head started to spin. He had to sit down. He sat down and with his head in his hands, listened to Sarah's insane confession as she kept on rambling. The hospital was a perfect place to get my revenge, Robert. They were going to pull the plug on Claire. So I knew that if I sent him there, he'd die. A nurse walked by and overheard the conversation and called security right away. Robert stood up and ran outside the hospital. The night air hit him like a slap. He needed to clear his head. Sarah's voice, that cold, brittle voice, was still ringing in his ears. She sent him there. The rage inside him was a live wire, threatening to explode. He started walking, fast, not caring where he was going. Just away. Away from the hospital, away from the lies, away from the crushing weight of everything. He ended up in Central Park, the same park where Alex had picked those wildflowers. The memory hit him hard, a punch to the gut. That kid, giving, selfless, and Sarah used him. Used his illness, his dying wish, as some kind of twisted weapon. He sat down on a bench, his head in his hands. He had to do something. He couldn't let her get away with this. But what? The police? Would they even believe him? A Wall Street guy accusing his ex-wife of, what? Murder? Conspiracy? It sounded insane, even to him. Then he remembered something. Alex's medical chart. The do. Not resuscitate order. That was proof. Proof that Sarah had planned this. He had to get that chart. He turned around and started running back towards the hospital. He didn't care about security, about rules, about anything. He needed that chart. He burst through the doors, ignoring the stares of the nurses and doctors. He knew where the records room was. He'd been there 1,000,000 times, filling out forms, signing consents. He found the chart, tucked away in a file cabinet. He grabbed it, his hands shaking. He had to get out of here. But as he turned to leave, he saw something else. A file, thicker than the others, labeled Hayes Alexander, Extended Medical History. His curiosity got the better of him. He pulled it out. He started flipping through the pages, his eyes scanning the medical jargon. Then he saw it. A genetic analysis report. He read it again and again, his heart pounding in his chest. The report indicated that Alex suffered not only from leukemia, but a rare immunodeficiency. An immunodeficiency that was almost exclusively found in individuals with a very specific genetic marker. A marker that Claire Thompson also possessed. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was that the report also stated that Alex's genetic profile was almost an exact match to Robert Thompson's own DNA. Impossible. He read the report again. There had to be a mistake, but the numbers didn't lie. Alex wasn't Claire's half-brother. Alex was Robert's son. His son. A son he never knew existed. A son that Sarah had kept from him. A son that Sarah had used, manipulated, and ultimately killed. He sank to the floor, the file falling from his numb fingers. His whole world was spinning. He had lost Claire twice, and now he had lost Alex, a son he never knew he had. To the woman he used to love. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered and died, plunging the records room into darkness. A cold draft swept through the room, raising goosebumps on his arms. He heard a faint whisper, a voice that sounded eerily familiar. Robert. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that voice. It was Claire, but that was impossible. Claire was dead. Robert, help me. The voice whispered again, closer this time. He stood up slowly, his eyes straining in the darkness. He reached into his pocket for his phone, fumbling with the power button. The screen flickered to life, casting a weak light on the room, and that's when he saw her. Standing in the corner, bathed in shadow. It wasn't Claire. It was Sarah. But it wasn't the Sarah he knew. Her eyes were black, empty. Her face was pale, gaunt, and in her hand, she held a syringe. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Robert whispered, his voice trembling. She smiled, a slow, sinister smile that sent shivers down his spine. "I'm cleaning up loose ends, Robert." And then she lunged. She smiled, a slow, sinister smile that sent shivers down his spine. "I'm cleaning up loose ends, Robert." And then she lunged. He didn't even have time to scream. The syringe flashed in the dim light, a silver glint aimed right at his neck. He threw himself back, stumbling, knocking over a stack of files. They scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. He scrambled to his feet, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "What are you doing, Sarah?" She didn't answer, just stopped towards him, syringe held high. Her eyes were like black holes, sucking in all the light. She looked possessed. He backed away, cornered. He had to think, had to find a way out. He scanned the room, desperate for anything he could use. As a weapon. A chair? A fire extinguisher? Nothing. She was getting closer. He could smell her perfume, that same expensive scent he used to love. Now it just made him sick. "You're insane!" he yelled. "You can't do this!" She laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. "Oh, I can, Robert, and I will. You ruined everything. You and that thing you called a daughter." Rage surged through him, eclipsing the fear. "Don't you dare talk about Claire like that!" He lunged at her, knocking the syringe from her hand. It clattered to the floor, rolling into the shadows. They grappled, a desperate struggle in the darkness. He felt her nails raking his face, her teeth snapping at his arm. He managed to pin her against a file cabinet, his hands gripping her wrists. "Why, Sarah? Why did you do all this?" Her eyes narrowed. "Because I hate you. I hate her. I hate everything you represent." And then she did something that shattered him. Something he never could have imagined. She whispered, "Claire wasn't your daughter, Robert." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. He stared at her, uncomprehending. What are you talking about?" She smirked. "She wasn't yours. She was David's. David, his best friend. His best friend who had died years ago in a car accident. His world tilted. Everything he thought he knew, everything he believed in, crumbled around him. Claire, not his daughter? All those years, all that love, based on a lie? He released her wrists, his hands going numb. He stumbled back, his legs giving way. He sank to the floor, a broken man. Sarah laughed, a triumphant, cruel laugh. "Now do you understand, Robert? Now do you see how much I hate you?" She reached for the syringe, her fingers closing around it. But before she could inject him, something happened. The door to the Record's room burst open. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, bathed in the harsh light of the hallway. It was Claire. But it couldn't be. Claire was dead. He saw her flatline. He saw the doctors pronounce her. But there she was, standing in the doorway, her eyes wide and alert. And in her hand, she held a gun. "Get away from him, Mom," she said, her voice cold and steady, "or I swear I'll shoot." "Get away from him, Mom," she said, her voice cold and steady, "or I swear I'll shoot." Robert's head swam. Claire? Alive? With a gun? He couldn't process. Sarah froze, the syringe dangling from her hand. Her face twisted with a mixture of fury and disappointment. "Claire, baby, what are you doing?" Sarah asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Don't call me that," Claire spat, her grip on the gun tightening. "You lost that right a long time ago." Robert tried to sit up, but his body was weak, his head pounding. What was happening? This couldn't be real. It had to be a dream, or a nightmare. "Claire, put the gun down." "We can talk about this," Robert croaked, trying to reason with her. He didn't want her to do something she'd regret. Claire didn't even look at him. Her eyes were locked on Sarah, filled with a cold, unwavering hatred he'd never seen before. "You tried to kill him," Claire said, her voice barely a whisper. "You tried to kill my father." Robert's breath hitched. "Father? Did she know about David?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Claire, he's lying. He's trying to turn you against me." "Shut up!" Claire screamed, her voice cracking. "I heard everything. Everything you said." The room was silent, except for the sound of Claire's ragged breathing. The tension was so thick, Robert could taste it. Then, out of nowhere, Sarah laughed. A loud, hysterical laugh that echoed through the room. "Oh, honey, you think you know everything, don't you?" she said, wiping a tear from her eye. "You think you're so smart, but you have no idea." Claire frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Sarah took a step forward, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "You want to know the truth, Claire? The real truth?" Claire hesitated, her fingers still on the trigger. "What is it?" Sarah smiled, a slow, evil smile that chilled Robert to the bone. "Alex wasn't just your brother, honey. He was your son." The gun slipped from Claire's hand, clattering to the floor. Her eyes widened, filled with disbelief. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, that's not true. It can't be." Sarah nodded, her smile widening. "Oh, it's true, honey. You were so young, so naive. I took care of everything. I made sure no one ever found out. And now you know." Robert stared at Claire, then at Sarah. Alex? Her son? It was impossible. But it made sense. The connection she felt. The way she responded to him. Claire staggered back, her face ashen. No. She turned and ran, blindly, out of the records room, out of the hospital. Out of their lives. Sarah just stood there watching her go, a satisfied smirk on her face. Then she turned to Robert, her eyes filled with a cold, empty hatred. "Now," she said, picking up the syringe. "Where were we?" "Now," she said, picking up the syringe. "Where were we?" He stared at her, helpless. Claire, gone. His son, gone. His life, a lie. He was finished. But then, something clicked. A memory. Alex. His eyes. His unwavering faith. He couldn't give up. Not yet. He looked at Sarah, her face contorted with hatred. He saw the madness in her eyes, and he knew. He knew he had to stop her. Not just for himself, but for Claire. For Alex. For everyone she'd hurt. He took a deep breath, focusing all his energy. He wasn't a Wall Street titan anymore. He was a father. A broken father, but a father nonetheless. He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain. He had to buy time. "You're wrong, Sarah," he said, his voice stronger now. "Claire wasn't a mistake. She was the best thing that ever happened to me." Sarah sneered. "Liar. And Alex, he was a good kid. He deserved better than this." "He was a pawn," she hissed. "Nothing more." "No," Robert said, shaking his head. "He was a hero. He gave Claire hope. He showed me what really matters." He took a step towards her, then another. He could see the doubt flicker in her eyes. She wasn't as strong as she pretended to be. "You can't win, Sarah," he said, his voice low and steady. "You've already lost." She hesitated, her grip on the syringe loosening. He could see the fear creeping into her face. And then the lights flickered again. This time, they didn't just go out, they exploded. A deafening blast ripped through the room. Glass shattered, metal twisted, the floor shook. Robert was thrown to the ground, the force of the explosion knocking the wind out of him. He coughed, choking on dust and smoke. When he could finally see, the records room was a disaster. Files were scattered everywhere. The file cabinets were overturned. And Sarah? She was gone. A wave of panic washed over him. What had just happened? Was it a bomb? An accident? He struggled to his feet, his ears ringing. He had to get out of here. He stumbled through the wreckage, trying to find a way out. He had to find Claire. He had to make sure she was okay. As he reached the doorway, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Standing in the hallway, amidst the chaos, was a figure cloaked in shadows. A figure he recognized instantly. It was David. But that was impossible. David was dead. He died in a car accident years ago. Robert had seen the body. He'd attended the funeral. But there he was, standing in the hallway, his eyes glowing with an eerie light. A sinister smile stretched across his face. "Hello, Robert," David said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Long time no see." Robert stared at him, speechless. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. This couldn't be real. "But you're dead," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. David laughed, a cold, chilling laugh that sent shivers down Robert's spine. "Death is just a state of mind, Robert, and I've been waiting a long, long time to come back." He took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Robert. "It's time to settle some old scores, my friend." And then he raised his hand, and in his hand he held a detonator. "Hello, Robert," David said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Long time no see." Robert stared at him, speechless. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. This couldn't be real. But you're dead," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. David laughed, a cold, chilling laugh that sent shivers down Robert's spine. "Death is just a state of mind, Robert. And I've been waiting a long, long time to come back." He took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Robert. "It's time to settle some old scores, my friend." And then he raised his hand, and in his hand, he held a detonator. Robert's mind raced. Detonator? What was he planning? Before he could react, David pressed the button. Nothing. David frowned, pressing the button again. Still nothing. He looked down at the detonator, his face contorted with frustration. "Damn it!" he spat, hitting the device against his palm. Always with the faulty equipment. Robert saw his chance. He lunged forward, tackling David to the ground. The detonator flew from his hand, skittering across the floor. They wrestled, a brutal, desperate fight in the wreckage of the records room. David was strong, stronger than Robert remembered. Years of whatever he'd been doing since his death had clearly given him an edge, but Robert was fueled by rage, by grief, by the burning need to protect Claire. He landed a punch, then another. David staggered back, clutching his jaw. Suddenly a voice rang out, clear and strong above the chaos. "Stop!" Robert and David both froze, turning towards the sound. Standing in the doorway, framed by the flickering emergency lights, was a figure that made Robert's heart stop. It was Claire. But it wasn't the Claire he knew. This Claire was different. Her eyes were cold, calculating. Her face was set in a hard, unfamiliar expression, and in her hand she held a gun. But it wasn't pointed at David. It was pointed at Robert. "Clue?" Robert whispered, his voice trembling. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on him, filled with a hatred that was as shocking as it was incomprehensible. "I know everything, Robert," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I know what you did." Robert's mind reeled. What was she talking about? What could he have possibly done to deserve this? "Claire, I don't understand," he pleaded. "What are you saying?" She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You really don't, do you? You think you're the victim here? You think you're the good guy?" She took a step forward, the gun never wavering. "You destroyed my life, Robert. You ruined everything. I tried to help you. Claire, I loved you!" Robert cried, his voice cracking with desperation. "Love?" she spat. "That's what you call it? You stole my childhood. You controlled every aspect of my life. You made me into a monster." Robert stared at her, speechless. This was insane. This wasn't the Claire he knew. This wasn't his daughter. "What are you talking about?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You don't remember, do you?" she said, her eyes glinting with a manic light. "The experiments, the treatments, the lies. Experiments? Treatments?" Robert had no idea what she was talking about. "I don't know what you mean," he said, shaking his head. "I would never hurt you, Claire. Never." She laughed again, a long, chilling laugh that echoed through the wreckage. "Oh, but you did, Robert. You did. And now it's my turn." She raised the gun, her finger tightening on the trigger. Robert closed his eyes, bracing for the impact. But then a voice cut through the silence. "Claire, stop." It was David. He lunged forward, grabbing Claire's arm, trying to wrestle the gun from her grasp. They struggled. To his feet, ignoring the pain, ignoring the confusion, ignoring everything except the need to protect her. He stumbled towards them, reaching out, trying to pry Claire's fingers from the gun. But then everything went black. A searing pain exploded in his head. He staggered back, clutching his skull, his vision blurring. He looked down and saw a dark stain spreading across his chest. He looked up and saw David, standing over him, a bloody pipe clutched in his hand. "Sorry, Robert," David said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Collateral damage." Robert sank to the floor, his lifeblood seeping away. He looked up at Claire, her face a mask of horror. I don't understand," he whispered, his voice fading. Claire stared at him, her eyes wide with fear. I didn't want this," she said, her voice trembling. David smiled, a slow, sinister smile that chilled Robert to the bone. Oh, but you did, Claire, he said, stroking her cheek. You just didn't know it yet. And then he leaned down and whispered something in her ear. Robert couldn't hear what he said, but he saw the expression on Claire's face change. He saw the realization dawn in her eyes, and he knew, with a sickening certainty, that whatever David had just told her, it had changed everything. Claire looked at Robert, her eyes filled with a mixture of horror and understanding. I'm sorry, Robert, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. And then she turned and walked away, leaving Robert to die in the wreckage of his life, leaving him with a question that would haunt him for eternity. What had David told her, and what did Claire finally understand? Claire turned and walked away, leaving Robert to die in the wreckage of his life, leaving him with a question that would haunt him for eternity. What had David told her? And what did Claire finally understand? Darkness. That's all he felt at first. Just a heavy, suffocating blackness. Then came the pain. A searing agony that ripped through his body, stealing his breath. He tried to move, but his limbs were heavy, unresponsive. He was dying. He knew it. He thought of Claire, his daughter. Or not his daughter? The confusion swirled in his head, a toxic fog. He thought of Alex, his son, gone, stolen. And Sarah, a monster in his life. He closed his eyes, surrendering to the darkness. This was it, the end. But then a light, a faint, flickering light in the distance. He strained to see, his vision blurring. Was it heaven? Hell? The light grew brighter, closer, and then a face. A familiar face. Dad? Robert blinked, trying to focus. The face swam into view. It was Claire, but different. Her eyes were soft, gentle. Her face was filled with love. Claire? He croaked, his voice barely a whisper. What are you doing here? She knelt beside him, her hand gently stroking his hair. I'm here to help you, Dad. Dad? She called him Dad. After everything, after David, she still called him Dad. I don't understand, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Why? Why are you here? She smiled, a sad, sweet smile that broke his heart. I know everything, Dad. Everything David told me. Everything Sarah did. But how? He stammered. How could you know? She took a deep breath, her eyes filled with a strange, almost ethereal light. I'm not really here, Dad. Not in the way you think. He stared at her, uncomprehending. What do you mean? She reached out and took his hand, her touch sending a jolt of energy through his body. I'm a part of you, Dad. Always have been, always will be. And then she said something that shattered everything he thought he knew. You see, Dad, David never died in that car accident. Sarah paid him off. He went into hiding, changed his identity. He's been watching us all along, waiting for the right moment to finish what he started. But Sarah double-crossed him. She wanted it all for herself. Robert's mind reeled. David alive? Sarah's accomplice? It was too much, too insane. But why? He whispered. Why would they do this? Claire squeezed his hand. Her eyes filled with a deep, ancient sorrow. It all started with you, Dad, with your success, with your power. David always envied you. He wanted what you had. And Sarah, she was just a pawn in his game, a tool to be used and discarded. And Alex? Robert choked out, the name tearing at his heart. Was he also part of their plan? Claire shook her head sadly. No, Dad. Alex was innocent. He was just a victim like us. He had a gift, a connection to something beyond, David wanted to exploit that gift, but Alex was too pure, too good, so they got rid of him. Robert closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. Lies upon lies, deceit upon deceit, his entire life a carefully constructed illusion. "But if you're not really here," he whispered, "then how can you help me?" Claire smiled again, that sad, sweet smile that filled him with a strange sense of peace. "I can't save you, Dad, not physically, but I can show you the truth. I can give you the strength to face what comes next." And then she faded, slowly, gradually, until she was gone, leaving Robert alone in the darkness. But this time, it wasn't the same darkness. This time, there was a spark, a tiny ember of hope. He knew what he had to do. He had to find David. He had to expose Sarah. He had to clear Alex's name. He took a deep breath, focusing all his energy. He was weak, wounded, but he was not defeated. He opened his eyes, the darkness receding. He could see again. He could feel again. And then he heard it. A faint, familiar sound. A heartbeat, not his own. Someone else was still alive in the wreckage. He struggled to his feet, ignoring the pain, following the sound. He found her buried beneath a pile of debris. Sarah. She was barely conscious, her face covered in blood. But her eyes were open. And they were locked on his. A flicker of fear crossed her face. But then something else, something far more disturbing. A smile. "It's not over, Robert," she whispered, her voice raspy, barely audible. "He's still out there." She gasped for air, her chest heaving. "David, he has Claire, and he's going to use her, to bring about the end." Robert stared at her, uncomprehending. "The end? What are you talking about?" Sarah coughed, blood trickling down her chin. He knows the truth about the experiments, about what they did to her, to make her." Her voice trailed off, her eyes glazing over. "To make her what, Sarah?" Robert pleaded, shaking her gently. "What did they do to her?" Sarah took one last ragged breath, and then she was gone. Robert knelt beside her, his mind racing. Experiments? What experiments? What had they done to Claire? And then he saw it, tucked into Sarah's clenched fist, a small, crumpled piece of paper. He carefully pried it open, his hands shaking. He unfolded the paper and read the words scrawled in Sarah's shaky handwriting. "Project Nightingale. Activate sleeper agent sequence." Below that, a series of numbers and symbols he couldn't decipher. But one phrase stood out, circled in red ink. "Trigger event, death." Of Robert Thompson. His blood ran cold. He finally understood. Claire wasn't a victim. She wasn't a pawn. She was a weapon designed to be activated by his death. And David was the one holding the trigger. Robert stood up, his legs trembling. He had to find Claire. He had to stop David. He had to save her from herself. But as he turned to leave the wreckage, he heard a voice behind him. A voice that made his blood run cold. "Looking for someone, Robert?" He turned slowly and saw David standing in the doorway, a sinister smile on his face. And in his arms, he held Claire. But it wasn't the Claire he knew. Her eyes were empty, vacant. Her face was blank, devoid of emotion. She looked programmed. "Say goodbye, Robert," David said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "It's time for Project Nightingale to take flight." And then Claire smiled, a slow, chilling smile that sent shivers down Robert's spine. A smile that told him everything he needed to know. The real nightmare was just beginning. Robert olhou para Claire, aqueles olhos vazios, programados. David sorria. Uma vitória cruel, mas no fundo, Robert sentia algo mais. Uma faísca, uma lembrança de quem Claire realmente era. Lágrimas escorreram pelo seu rosto. Não podia desistir. Claire, você não é isso, ele sussurrou, a voz fraca. Você é forte, você é boa. Nada. Apenas o sorriso vazio de David. Mas de repente, um tremor. Claire piscou. Uma lágrima escorreu pelo seu rosto. David apertou os braços em volta dela, tenso. Não, não vou deixar você tirá-la de mim. Robert grunhiu, a raiva borbulhando. Ele se levantou, cambaleando. A dor era excruciante, mas ele tinha que lutar. Ele se lançou sobre David, com toda a força que lhe restava. Um soco. David cambaleou, soltando Claire. Ela caiu no chão, atordoada. Robert agarrou Davy, levando-o para longe dela. Corra, Claire, corra! Ele gritou. Ela hesitou. Olhou para Robert, depois para Davy. E então, como se um véu se levantasse, seus olhos brilharam com uma fagulha de reconhecimento. Ela sabia. Davy se debateu, furioso. Você não entende. Ela é minha. Mas Claire entendeu. Ela se levantou, tremendo. E então ela fez algo inesperado. Ela pegou a pipe de metal caída no chão. Não, ela disse, a voz firme. Você não vai machucar mais ninguém. E com um grito gutural, ela acertou Davy. Ele caiu inconsciente. Robert caiu de joelhos, sem fôlego. Claire correu até ele, lágrimas escorrendo pelo rosto. Pai, me perdoe, ela soluçou. Eu não sabia. Eu não era eu mesma. Robert sorriu fracamente. Está tudo bem, Claire. Você está aqui. Você está bem. Mas a verdade era que nada estava bem. David estava inconsciente, mas vivo. Sarah, morta. Alex se foi. E a polícia estava a caminho. O que aconteceria agora? Para onde iriam? Como poderiam escapar de tudo aquilo? Claire pegou sua mão. Não sei, pai, mas vamos descobrir, juntos. E enquanto as sirenes se aproximavam, Robert sabia que uma nova jornada estava apenas começando. Uma jornada incerta, perigosa. Mas com Claire ao seu lado, ele sentia que tudo era possível. Apenas o que David tinha sussurrado para ela. Se você gostou deste final inesperado, você precisa se inscrever agora. Não perca as próximas histórias exclusivas que vão explodir sua mente. Esmague o botão de like agora. Este é o momento para demonstrar seu apoio e alimentar o algoritmo. Inunde a seção de comentários com suas reações e teorias sobre o final. Queremos saber o que você achou. Não espere nem mais um segundo para compartilhar este vídeo com pelo menos 5 amigos que precisam conhecer este desfecho. Só os verdadeiros fãs compreendem a importância de apoiar o canal.